Pope Sixtus V, the Iron Pope of the Counter-Reformation. Few pontiffs have left a more enduring and dramatic mark on Rome and the papacy than Pope Sixtus V, born Felice Peretti in 1521 to humble peasants in the rugged terrain of the marches of central Italy. His 5-year reign, 1585 to 1590, was short in duration but monumental in impact. A man of fierce energy, unwavering conviction, and authoritarian temperament, Sixtus V reshaped the governance of the Church, spearheaded massive urban reforms in Rome, and sought to centralize and invigorate papal authority at a time of profound religious, political, and cultural upheaval. His papacy exemplified the militant spirit of the Counter-Reformation, combining ruthless discipline with monumental ambition, and leaving a legacy that continues to shape the Roman Catholic Church and the city of Rome itself. Early life and ecclesiastical rise. Felice Peretti joined the Franciscan order at the age of 16, adopting the name Frater Montalto and soon establishing a reputation as a brilliant preacher and uncompromising theologian. Educated in Bologna, one of the preeminent centers of theological and legal scholarship in Europe, Peretti became a staunch advocate for the doctrinal reforms and spiritual renewal promoted by the Council of Trent. Deeply ascetic in personal discipline and zealous in matters of doctrine, he rose rapidly within the Franciscan hierarchy. His fervor for reform and intellectual acumen caught the eye of Pope Pius V, who elevated him to the rank of cardinal in 1570. Yet his rigid temperament and uncompromising stance alienated many of his peers. As a result, Peretti spent much of the pontificates of Gregory XIII and Sixtus IV in relative retirement, preparing in seclusion for what he may have seen as a divine destiny. His election to the papacy in April 1585 was the result of a conclave desperate for a strong hand to guide both church and city through crisis. Centralizing papal power. From the outset of his pontificate, Sixtus V governed with absolute authority and unswerving determination. His vision of the papacy was deeply rooted in the Tridentine vision of ecclesiastical discipline, clerical reform, and uncompromising orthodoxy. He sought to reassert the moral authority and institutional coherence of the Catholic Church, which had been deeply eroded by decades of Protestant challenge, internal corruption, and increasing interference by secular monarchs. His personal motto, in tempore opportuno, in due time, underscored his belief that he had been divinely appointed to restore order and sanctity to a world veering into chaos. His first priority was restoring civic order in Rome, a city plagued by lawlessness, corruption, and crime. Banditry was rampant in the countryside, and even within Rome, murder and theft had become commonplace. Sixtus's response was swift and uncompromising. He unleashed a wave of executions, imprisonments, and public punishments, sparing no effort to stamp out disorder. Gallows were erected at key crossroads, and the papal guard patrolled the streets with newfound zeal. While contemporaries and later historians would debate the brutality of his methods, few denied their effectiveness. In just a few months, Sixtus had transformed a city of fear and disorder into a relatively stable urban center. At the same time, Sixtus overhauled the Curia, the administrative heart of the Church. In 1588, he issued the Apostolic Constitution Immensa Aeterni Dei, a foundational document that reorganized the Roman congregations, dividing the papal administration into 15 departments, each tasked with specific ecclesiastical functions, ranging from the safeguarding of doctrine, supervision of bishops, regulation of missionary work, to oversight of heresy via the Roman Inquisition. This bureaucratic structure, though modified over the centuries, remains the backbone of Vatican governance to this day. Architectural and urban transformation. Sixtus V's most visible and enduring legacy is arguably his radical transformation of the city of Rome. He envisioned the city as not merely the spiritual capital of the Catholic world but as a symbol of the Church's eternal triumph over temporal disorder and pagan antiquity. Through a comprehensive program of urban planning, infrastructural renewal, and monumental construction, he sought to make Rome both a pilgrimage center and an awe-inspiring expression of divine and papal authority. One of his most emblematic acts was the relocation and erection of ancient Egyptian obelisks. With the help of his chief architect, Domenico Fontana, Sixtus had these towering monoliths transported from obscure locations and repositioned in prominent piazzas and church squares, most famously in St. Peter's Square, St. John Lateran, and Santa Maria Maggiore. These massive stones, reappropriated from their imperial and pagan past, were now crowned with crosses and Christian symbols, testaments to Christianity's conquest over idolatry. He also undertook the restoration and enhancement of Rome's major basilicas, including Santa Maria Maggiore, St. John Lateran, St. Peter's Basilica, and San Lorenzo Fuori le Mura. He improved access to these holy sites by constructing broad new avenues, such as the Via Sistina, Via Felice, and Strada Pia, that sliced through medieval neighborhoods to form direct, linear connections between major churches. These roads, based on Renaissance ideals of geometry, order, and perspective, facilitated pilgrim processions and reimagined Rome as a sacred space of divine order. In addition, he revitalized Rome's infrastructure by building the Aqua Felice, a monumental aqueduct named after his birth name, which restored fresh water to neglected quarters of the city. Fountains, monuments, and chapels sprung up in newly accessible areas, giving form to his vision of a Christian metropolis renewed. Fiscal policy and controversy. To finance his ambitious projects, Sixtus V adopted a series of controversial fiscal policies that often blurred the line between reform and pragmatism. He authorized the sale of church offices, privileges, and titles, a practice officially condemned yet unofficially tolerated. Simony, long considered a moral and theological scandal, was now regulated under papal oversight. He expanded the issuance of indulgences, reintroduced old taxes, and instituted new levies on everything from ecclesiastical goods to local commerce. These measures proved effective in raising revenue, and by the end of his reign, the papal treasury had accumulated one of the largest surpluses in its history. However, the ethical implications of these methods reignited criticisms reminiscent of those voiced by the Protestant reformers earlier in the century. The juxtaposition of moral rigor in doctrine with fiscal opportunism in policy underscored the paradoxes of his rule. Diplomacy and foreign affairs. Sixtus V envisioned the papacy as a moral and political force that could check the ambitions of secular monarchs while defending the global interests of Catholicism. He took a hard-line stance in European politics, particularly in the conflicts engulfing France and England. In 1585, he excommunicated Henry of Navarre, the Protestant heir to the French throne, and supported the ultra-Catholic Holy League, hoping to prevent a heretic from ascending the French crown. He also threw cautious support behind Philip II of Spain and the Spanish Armada of 1588. Although he promised financial assistance to the Armada, he cleverly made it contingent upon success, thus avoiding losses when the expedition failed disastrously. His diplomatic vision was grand but not always practical, and many of his efforts to realign Catholic monarchs under papal authority were met with resistance or fell short of success. Death and legacy. Pope Sixtus V died in August 1590, aged 69, leaving behind a church and city transformed. Though many of his urban projects were unfinished at the time of his death, his successors completed much of his vision, solidifying his reputation as a builder pope, a reformer, and a modernizer. His tomb, fittingly grand and severe, stands in Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the basilicas he so lavishly restored. Historians continue to debate his legacy. Some portray him as a tyrant in a tiara, a man whose severity and absolutism contradicted the pastoral mission of the Church. Others hail him as a visionary, whose uncompromising zeal revitalized a demoralized institution and reasserted the independence and power of the Holy See at a time of existential threat. In truth, Sixtus V was a paradox, a pope who wielded the sword of justice and the compass of architecture with equal force, who pursued spiritual renewal while navigating political cunning, who imposed order through fear, but left behind beauty and coherence. His papacy stands as a striking example of the tensions that animated the Counter-Reformation and the ambitions that remade early modern Rome. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Medieval Chronicles 1066 for more journeys back to the Middle Ages. Stay curious.